If you're an ICF credentialed coach or you're looking to become one, the core competencies are a key thing that you need to master. So I'm creating this series here. I'm Brighton West. I work with coaches who want to use video just like this. And I'm creating a series about the core competencies. And I'm really excited to kick this off with core competency number one with Janet Harvey. But first, I wanted to have Janet maybe introduce herself just real quick and tell us about the history of the core competencies before we get started with number one.
Thanks, Brighton. And I'm just very excited that you've chosen to do this. I believe that the competencies are what really initiated the field or the practice of coaching towards something that we declare as a profession. And while technically that may not be true yet, we're only 22 years old in its official capacity. While coaching has been around much longer on the planet, what happened 22 years ago is the team of volunteers who came together and said, let's write down what we're doing and see if we can find a way to make this not only clear to consumers of the coaching process, but also how do we transfer the skill set in a really consistent way that provides a professional development path and ensures that the quality of the coaching is consistent no matter where it's delivered around the world. And that's what the core competencies provide us. It's a body of knowledge. It's the roots of the work from which, and I often refer to it as a framework, but from which then each coach can uniquely express themselves and know that they are abiding the rigor, that is the efficacy of coaching as we understand it through that coaching competency framework, but also allow for them to have their own authentic presence with their customers, which is what makes this such a remarkable profession, because it is borderless in that it's practiced the same everywhere, and it is individualized, which means there's no competition in coaching. Every coach has their unique expression, which is attractive to their unique clients.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for that. I think it's since I started working with coaches, really starting to understand the core competencies and the difference between kind of an ICF credentialed coach, or at least someone who's following the guidelines, and right. Other coaches who might be doing things differently. It's an important distinction. So I'm wondering if you can go ahead and just kick off number one. So the professional standards and the ethical guidelines. So meeting those, can you tell us kind of the definition there? What does that mean?
Sure. And there's really three components to this particular competency. And the first, very important, is the definition of coaching. I often find that coaches step over this and don't spend as much time as they really would benefit from spending with customers talking about the definition of coaching and how it distinguishes itself from other professional modalities, all of which are wonderful for human development. However, coaching is the only one that is a peer-based relationship. So in the definition, which is part one of the code of this particular competency, it talks about coaching is partnering with clients. That's a peer-to-peer partnership. Unlike other practices, which are superior subordinate, where you have an expert passing information, guidance, practice to someone else, we're actually in a relationship where we really have no idea what the right answer is for the client. They are their best advisor, but they don't listen to themselves very well, and they don't take a lot of time to relax and allow for something to emerge. And a well-trained coach can elicit that from the client, and then they have choice to do what is useful and contributory to their lives. This is a very unique relationship. And the second part of the definition is about a thought-provoking and creative process. Now, that conversation that we have over time with a client, the metaphor we often use is helps them peel the onion of their lives to find the sweet spot at the center. And ultimately, why are we doing this? The definition talks about maximizing personal and professional potential. I think we also help people realize they have untapped potential in themselves, that they've either forgotten or have chosen for some reason to push away from their lives, but they've reached a moment, which is what's brought them to coaching in the first place, where they want something more and they They have a hunch that it lives inside of them, but they have no idea how to get there. So it's about both realizing and then making the choices to maximize personal and professional potential in their lives. And one more piece on that definition, notice it says both personal and professional. Coaching is working with the whole life of the human being. So whether someone comes as an executive of an organization, or maybe they are a parent trying to find their way with their teenage kids, or maybe they're a community leader. It doesn't matter what their opening context is. As coaches, we're always working with the whole of who they are as a person. Wherever they start, all of the other domains are going to arrive into the conversation that occurs over time, so that that person is not only addressing maybe an initial need that came forward in the coaching contract, but they're going to see they're growing and transforming as a human being, and it will affect all parts of their lives.
Great. Well, thank you, Janet. It's much deeper than I thought. I kind of was like, oh, okay, there are a couple check boxes here probably. So thank you for explaining that. And for our audience members, I am not a coach. I just work with coaches. So I'm learning along with you guys. So I guess maybe you could, you're a mentor coach, and you also have a school, an entire school. So maybe you could tell a little bit about, when you're doing a mentor coaching, what it looks like when someone has really mastered this competency.
Yeah, I think there's an overarching principle, if you will, behind the standards of ethical conduct. And I'm going to say something about the 4 parts for a moment, and then I'll come back to the principle, which is, the first part is about your professional conduct as large. In other words, how do you be a professional? What is expected of you as a representative of the profession? That's section 1. It'll seem very straightforward when you read the words. However, when you start to think about particular situations, this is when ethics become gray, and it's a matter of judgment. And ultimately, part 2 is about conflicts of interest. Oh boy, it's amazing how easy we can get caught up in those. Part 3 talks about the actual conduct with clients, the interaction that's happening with the clients and what to be on the lookout for. And then 4th is confidentiality and privacy, which is really important to creating the trust and intimacy necessary for a successful coaching partnership. So all 4 sections of the code speak to the things that we expect professional coaches to practice in the way that they build the relationship with their customers. And the underlying principle is that we accept and perceive our clients as whole. Some organizations will also add resourceful and capable. At Invite Change, we also add the word creative. We believe that clients are innately creative. And while we might have gotten it beat out of us because we couldn't draw a fancy line in art class in the 4th grade, what we really realize as adults is that we have many, many, many ways to express our creativity. And when clients can reconnect with that, it gives them a lot more choice, a lot more opportunity and possibility in their lives. But that means that we must have an internal stance as a practitioner, that we can see beyond whatever a client presents in the initial situation. They might be struggling, they might be in pain, they might be frustrated. Whatever the emotion is that has them blocked or stuck is situational. It's not the whole of who they are. It's so much more inside of them, and our opportunity is to draw it out. Now, in order for a client to trust that experience, to allow the vulnerability for something to emerge, we must have a standard of professional conduct. And that's what the 4 sections really provides guidance about for coach practitioners.
So I think I want you to I'm looking for something kind of a little more specific. I mean, that was great, but I want something more specific in terms of, like, what are you listening for when you're watching like a coach session, and you say, oh, this person, like, they properly, talk to the client about, confidentiality, or what are some of those things that you're like, okay, this person, yeah, they understand this competency.
Yeah. I hear the question, and my answer is going to sound a little antithetical, because different from the other competencies, this one is assessed and evaluated when one is practicing coaching for its absence. In other words, there was no situation that arose in the conversation that warranted the coach pausing for a moment to say, we're creeping into territory that isn't appropriate for coaching. So I want to pause the coaching and talk about whether this might be better served in a counseling conversation or a consulting conversation or a training issue. So it's the absence of a violation that we're actually listening for.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very good. So then I guess the next question I typically ask is, what does it look like when someone hasn't mastered this? And I would assume that just looks like violations.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and some of them are a little tricky because what constitutes a conflict of interest means that we are taking into account the practitioner's value system, the client's value system, the things that are articulated in the code. This is why it's tricky. When you read the language of the competency itself, the standards of ethical conduct, they're pretty straightforward. Everybody kind of shrugs their shoulders and says, yes, of course, until they have a situation when they realize, uh-oh, this person is telling me about a situation at work where they're not going to tell the whole truth to their boss. What do I do now? And so if I'm mentoring a student and that's what's come up, we're going to have a discussion about where their courage went, because their first obligation is to the integrity of that conversation. And particularly if they're working for an organization, their first client is the company, not the candidate. And what are the things that must be disclosed and escalated to a coaching program manager? Well, one of them would be when there's employee malfeasance, which lying to the boss about something going on with a customer would absolutely be an example of. So there's a ripple effect that this moment in a coaching session may seem fairly tame. However, if that's actually a pattern of lying, then we have an employee who's performing in a way that is not consistent with what the company expects, and our allegation is to the company. So coaches must think this through situationally and start to understand where the potential pitfalls are. So studying the competencies through scenarios and examples, very, very useful.
great. Thank you. I think one of the things, and I'm going to make an assumption here, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, is it seems like under this competency, professional standards and ethical guidelines would be to make sure that the person you are coaching, if you are working for a company, if you are coaching an employee, that they understand that relationship between you and them and you and their boss, because that, if they need to know, I guess.
Yes, they do. And this is section 3, the professional conduct with clients, which talks a lot about contracting. And one of the steps that's really very useful as you're setting up a coaching relationship is to have your customer read the code of ethics. And so that's individuals or enterprises. And what happens in enterprises is another layer of complexity is, as a coach, read their employee guidelines. What are the things that you could get tripped up by because you don't know that there are certain ethical boundaries that are industry specific or company specific? Healthcare and financial services are two really big ones where they have a much higher standard than our code of ethics, and we must abide that as well. And of course, a legal system in a particular country or state or municipality will also take precedence. So this is a really important part of the contracting process, is being transparent about what are the boundaries that are influencing our relationship that we both want to be aware of, client, so that if we tend to drop into that territory, we can pause and say, what do we want to do about this? And ensure that we're both staying alert and purposeful about how we navigate those situations, because they are going to arise. Ethics is in every day, which is why it's such a big piece of society.
Yes, definitely. So I would normally ask, and maybe I'm going to throw this question out there because this is one of the questions I intend to ask for each of the competencies. Is there a difference between what someone as an ACC, PCC, or MCC would be judged on here? I almost feel like maybe not, because this one's a lot more black and white of a competency than the others, which people grow in over time.
Exactly. Exactly. Does not matter your level of experience. In fact, the third section of the competency is the pledge of ethics. And students in coach training are expected to sign that pledge of ethics before they start coaching, even in class. And that pledge of ethics is part of becoming a member of the International Coach Federation. We re-pledge every time we renew our membership. And so this is a fundamental structure that's a little bit like the entry ticket to the game. Right, without understanding and choosing to pledge your commitment to the ethical code of conduct, you don't get to play. And so it doesn't matter, ACC, PCC, or MCC. And I personally feel like ethical maturity is a lifelong learning journey. I am astounded by the things that show up as an accredited coaching supervisor. It's very common that a practitioner will hire me to spend some time looking at a situation where they suspect, I think I might be in a little ethical quagmire here, and I'm not sure how to navigate my way out of it. So it's a common discussion.
Very good. Yeah, this is a much more interesting competency than I expected. So I'm glad that this is first, and I'm glad that you're able to really, give us a lot of, you have a real depth of knowledge about this competency. So I'm glad that we're starting here. But I want to give you a chance to just kind of let people know how they can contact you before we wrap up today, and then folks will be moving on to the other competencies.
Fantastic. So Janet Harvey is my name, and if you put that into LinkedIn or Facebook, you're going to find me. You'll also find me through Invite Change. That's our company name. And janet.harvey@invitechange.com is my email. And I love talking about this subject. I actually think of all of the competencies, it's the one that really gives us permission to grow the field, the profession, if you will, around the globe. And the ICF is the only global standard of professional ethics that exists. There are other associations who have ethical standards. They've followed our example. And the European Union used ours as the basis to make it a self-regulated profession recognized by the EU. So this is a really important thing to be proud of and to add to your discussion with prospective customers as a mark of your credibility as a professional in the field of coaching.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Janet, for sharing with us. And thank you for watching. And you can go ahead and click right up here. You're going to be able to go directly into number 2. Or if you'd like to subscribe to my channel, like I mentioned, I help coaches use video to further their practice. You can go ahead and subscribe down here. We'll see you in the next video.